How's it going? Dave, I'm making a quick video to show why replacing a water pump will not fix a no start issue. So here I have a Subaru engine. This is not obviously the same engine that's in your Nissan, but they share a lot of similar characteristics, as in the water pump functions exactly the same as do, it's a 4-cylinder just like yours, and they both have head gaskets, as most vehicles do. So here's a water pump, and this one probably doesn't look a lot like yours, but it does the same thing. This one is belt driven. The belt turns this pulley, and on this side it's got an impeller, and what this does is it pulls the coolant through and runs it through these galleys all over the engine. It pulls it from the radiator that cools it off through these passages on the engine, here and here. These are called the water jackets of the engine, and the reason why the coolant runs through these is it takes the thermal energy out of the block to keep the motor from overheating, sends it out to the radiator where the radiator cools it off, and then the water pump sucks it back and keeps cooling off the engine. And then this galley right here is the high pressure port for the oil, and then these galleys right here are the oil return lines. And you can see as I rotate this engine, we got the pistons coming up and down. So this is a 4-cycle internal combustion engine. Just like your car, it's got 4 cycles. So let's follow this piston right here from top dead center. Piston starts out at the top. We have the intake stroke where the piston pulls down. On this stroke, we pull in air from the atmosphere and gasoline from the injectors. The next stroke is the compression stroke, where the piston comes up and it's actually compressing the gas. And when I say it's compressing the gas, I mean all the valves are closed and the piston is actually taking a volume of gas this big and compressing it to a smaller area. And this is necessary because we have to compress the gas before the spark plug can ignite. And then when the spark plug ignites, the gasoline burns, and the gasoline turns from a solid into a gas, expanding. This is called the combustion stage, and it forces the piston down. This is how internal combustions get their power. And then after that, the piston comes back up, and we have, of course, the exhaust stroke, where it takes all that dirty, nasty gas that's been burnt for that power stroke, and it sends it out through the exhaust of the car. So again, we have intake, compression, combustion, exhaust, and it does this over and over and over. So what happened to your car is the question. Well, on top of this engine, we have this is called a cylinder head. And you see we have the valves in there. This is the intake side. The air goes in those ports. And this is the exhaust side. The exhaust gas goes out of those ports. And this cylinder head sits on top of this block just like that. See, it's a match made in heaven. But the problem is we can't have metal touching metal because it doesn't seal. So what do we put in here? Well, this is an engine block. This is a cylinder head. We put a head gasket in here. So I know that you heard that term a lot. This is what it is. It seals off the cylinder head to the engine block, and it's got a really important job. It seals in those gases when the piston comes up and compresses. It seals the gases after the spark plugs. You can see them up there. After they ignite the gas inside of the cylinders, it keeps the coolant in the water jackets, and it keeps the oil in the oil galleys. So I don't have a head gasket here that I can show you because I threw all of them out. But it's just a thin, just like any other gasket that you would look at. Pretty thin, made of metal, some other synthetic materials. And what happens is that engine, that particular car, Sierra's car, was in a front-end accident where all the coolant left the car. Well, once the coolant leaves the car, the engine gets really hot. This is an aluminum motor. Sierra's motor is also aluminum. If you take a pan out of the oven and you put it on the counter, it goes sprung and it warps. Well, the same thing happens here, but it happens on a much smaller level. When that cylinder head gets really hot, it also warps. but it only has to warp 1/1000th of an inch or 2/1000th of an inch. And when that warps, the amazing pressure that's inside of this engine blows through that head gasket. And look at what's, excuse me, look at what's right next to it. This is, these are the cylinders, right? This is where all that fancy compression and combustion goes on. Well, once the head gasket fails, where is all the pressure from the engine cranking over, trying to start, going to go? It's not going to go into the oil galleys. It's going to go into the water jacket. And when the pistons come up and try to make that compression, intake, compression, combustion, exhaust, instead of compressing the air into the cylinders, it's going to bleed out right into the water jacket, and it's going to pressurize the water jacket. So you guys probably have, since Jose says the water pump is leaking, you probably do have a leaking water pump, and it probably should be replaced. But the car doesn't have compression, and if you replace that leaking water pump, the car will still have no compression, because the car needs compression to turn over. And so that's the reason why the coolant is coming out of the water pump only when you try to turn the motor over, because when it tries to compress that gas, and then sends that spark there to ignite that fuel can't ignite from that spark plug unless it's compressed, and that's why the coolant system is getting pressurized. The two are totally not related. If you have a failed water pump, your engine will fail, so they are related in that sense. But in terms of a starting circuit or a failure to start, you only need three things to make a car to run. You need a fuel, you need compression, and you need an ignition. Mechanically, how can these things fail? Actually, you know what? Let's go over fuel first. You know the car has fuel, and if the car doesn't have fuel, you spray some starting fluid in it, starts up, you know that you have a fuel issue. This car does not have a fuel issue. How about ignition? Well, what you do is you take a spark tester, it looks just like a spark plug, you put it in a spark plug boot and you ground it out against the engine like so, and then you go to crank the car, and as the electrical current comes through this cathode on the end of this spark tester, it's going to arc against the walls and you can see the spark. So that's how we know we got spark. Okay, so we have gas, we have spark. What's the only thing left that we can't have? Compression. So why don't we have compression? Because the integrity of the head gasket has been compromised and the gas is leaking out from the combustion chamber and from the cylinder into the water jackets of the motor. And the only reason I bring this up is because it's a prime example of arbitrary replacement of parts, and it's really cold outside, and I just think it sucks that, I mean, I know Jose wants to fix the car and I give him kudos for it, but I think it sucks that he's got to sit out there and do this, and I wish that he wouldn't, because I know it's not going to start the car. But anyways, so one more thing I want to cover. You say, well, I put some stuff in a can and it fixed it. Well, what that does is, I'm sure that you probably poured it into the coolant system of the car. That stuff gets everywhere. It gets all over your radiator, it gets all over your water pump, it gets all over your water jackets, and it finds that leak, and the extreme heat around that leak makes that synthetic material harden, and it seals that gap. And I'm telling you, it is a miracle that stuff sealed that gap and that car ran for as long as it did. And it wasn't going to last forever because that head gasket is an incredibly important part. So the integrity of that seal has been compromised yet once again. And I guarantee you, if you pull that head off, you will see that there's a hole in the head gasket, and that's why it won't start. So you could try that, fix it in a can again, but really what has to happen is that cylinder head has to come off, and you have to deck the block, because since it's been ran for so long, it may have even eaten into the aluminum. It has to be replaced. So I'm relatively impressed that I explained this whole thing in under 10 minutes. Looks like I'm at 9 minutes and 40 seconds now. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. One thing that you can do to test and confirm my theory, which really isn't much of a theory because I would bet a lot of money that this is exactly what's going on. It's very simple to diagnose, is you can take a compression tester kit. I have several of these. They're very inexpensive. They're about $20, and this is all it is. It's got some threads that look exactly like a spark plug. You just take your spark plugs out, thread this sucker in, take this little quick connect, put it on the end, and then you crank the car. Sit in the car, hold the gas down so the butterfly valve on the throttle body's open and it can get some air in there. Crank, 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 and this guy should read pressure. It should probably come up to, on a healthy engine, at least 100 psi. Normally it's around 120, 130. You can look up the specs for your engine online. But super easy to diagnose. You can take the spark tester, make sure it's got spark. I'm sure that you could just crank it and pull the spark plugs out and smell them. I'm sure they've got fuel doused all over them from cranking the car for so long. And this will be the conclusive test. It's incredibly easy to do. Compression test, drop it in. You got no compression. You know the pistons are moving up and down. That compression's got to go somewhere. It's going into your coolant system. And that's it. So, I mean, if you really want to work on the car, you really want to do something, or you want to have a finite answer, or feel like you've established something, take the spark plug boots out, take the spark plugs out, hook this very simple compression tester up, 30 seconds on the starter, and that will be absolutely conclusive evidence. There's no way to screw this up. It's incredibly simple, and you won't bang up your fingers doing a water pump job that isn't really going to get you anywhere. So feel free to message me back. If Sierra's family is watching this, feel free to email me, mechanical, and my last name, Brandt, BRANDT, @gmail.com. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you got. Thanks very much.